It is 2 a.m. in New York, 7 in London, and 4 on a Thursday afternoon here in Seoul. I'm Moon Geunhye. This is ARIRANG, Korea's only global network. The U.S. House of Representatives has passed a bill addressing the issue of comfort women, those women forced into sexual slavery by the Japanese Army during the Second World War. Now, this is the first time the matter has been included in a U.S. congressional bill, and it is expected to increase pressure on the Japanese government to confront its wartime history. ARIRANG's foreign affairs correspondent Hwang Sung-hee has our top story.
U.S. lawmakers are formally calling on their government to pay more attention to the so-called comfort women, or women forced into sexual slavery by the Japanese military during the Second World War. In a document attached to a spending bill for 2014, the U.S. House of Representatives makes note of a 2007 resolution on the comfort women issue and urges the Secretary of State to encourage the government of Japan to address the issues raised in the resolution. The 2007 resolution calls on the Japanese government to issue an official apology for its wartime sexual enslavement of women. An estimated 200,000 females, mostly Korean, were used as sex slaves by the Japanese Army in the early 20th century, and many are still waiting for an apology from Tokyo, although time is running out for the aging victims. The bill passed on Wednesday is not legally binding, but is highly symbolic of Washington's efforts to address the matter. It marks the first time the comfort women issue has been included in U.S. legislation and is sure to ramp up pressure on the Japanese government. The Senate is expected to vote on the spending bill sometime this week, and if passed, it will be sent to the White House for President Barack Obama's signature. The bill comes amid increasing criticism from U.S. lawmakers towards Japan, following Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's controversial visit to the disputed Yasukuni War Shrine late last year. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
And staying in Washington, a U.S. Senate committee has approved a bill to extend the current U.S.-Korea civilian nuclear accord for another 2 years. The current agreement bans Korea from enriching uranium and reprocessing spent nuclear fuel amid concerns about proliferation on the peninsula. Well, Seoul is seeking to revise the agreement to allow it to do both in order to reduce nuclear waste and meet an increasing demand for energy, but Washington has been reluctant, and the two countries has thus far been unable to find common ground. The 2-year extension would give the two sides more time to seek resolution on the matter. The current agreement is scheduled to expire in March, but if the bill is approved by the full Senate and the House, it would give President Barack Obama a green light to extend the end date to March 2016. Now, President Park Geun-hye in New Delhi for her first overseas trip of the year is, as we speak, holding a bilateral talks with Indian Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. But not only that, the Korean leader during her stay in India is expected to pave the way for Korean businesses in the world's second most populous country. Our presidential office correspondent Oh Jin-ju is traveling with the president, and she filed us this report from New Delhi.
POSCO-style project to build a steel mill in the Indian state of Odisha looks like it's finally back on track, coinciding with President Park's state visit to India. The Korean steel giant was granted an environmental clearance for the 2,700 acres of land required for the project and has secured a promise from the Odisha state government that the Korean steel maker will be granted a prospecting license for an iron ore mine some 300 kilometers from the steel mill. The details will be confirmed during President Park's bilateral talks with Indian Prime Minister Manmohan Singh on Thursday. The project was launched in 2005 but has been delayed for roughly 9 years due to land acquisition issues and environmental concerns. The Korean government says that if the project goes forward as planned, the steel mill in Odisha will be able to start producing steel in 8 years, which is in 2022. It also expects the POSCO project to create some 870,000 jobs and generate annual sales of $3 billion. President Park, who arrived in the Indian capital of New Delhi on Wednesday, started her trip by meeting with Korean residents living in the South Asian country. The president said there are a lot of fields in which Korea and India can create synergy through cooperation, as the two countries each have a unique cultural heritage and are leading nations in advanced science and technology. In particular, she emphasized the importance of the Korean community in India.
양국이 협력을 확대해 나가는 과정에서 가장 큰 역할을 해 주셔야 할 분들이 동포 여러분이고 또 그 발전의 과실을 가장 크게 누리실 분들도 바로 여러분이라고 생각합니다.
President Park also pledged to seek greater opportunities for Korean businesses in India and reduce the difficulties Korean firms face when doing business in the nation by calling on the Indian government to reduce the restraints on foreign investment. Oh Jin-chu, ARIRANG News, New Delhi.
Now, Korea posted economic growth slower than all but one other emerging Asian nation in 2013. Seoul's Finance Ministry and the Korea Center for International Finance say Korea's growth rate last year is expected to stand at 2.8%. Now, only Taiwan recorded lower growth at 2%. China topped the list at 7.7%, followed by the Philippines and Indonesia. Well, forecasts for this year don't look that great either. Projections point towards 3.8% growth in 2014, which would see Korea ranked 7th. Experts worry Korea is falling behind due to a decrease in facilities investment and the strengthening local currency. Now, Korea's world-leading shipbuilding industry has been on a wild and quite unpredictable ride in recent years, due in large part to the ongoing effects of the global financial crisis. The future is looking rosier, though, despite growing competition from China. In this penultimate part of our 5-part series on the nation's industrial outlook for 2014, our Song Ji-sun tells us what to expect from Korea's shipbuilding sector.
The global shipbuilding industry is recovering from a long slump, and last year, Korea's major shipbuilders won more orders than they targeted. The big three, Samsung, Hyundai Heavy Industries, and Daewoo Shipbuilding and Marine Engineering, logged a combined total of $53 billion in orders, a 7-year high. When measured in terms of gross tonnage, the orders are nearly double from the previous year. 3 Northeast Asian nations of China, Korea, and Japan make up almost 90% of the world ship orders won, and China overtook Korea to become number 1 in 2007, taking advantage of massive ship orders placed by local ship operators and lower production costs. Korean shipbuilders now focus more on complex and expensive vessels, such as LNG carriers and drill ships, as they can no longer compete with their Chinese rivals in pricing. And the new year looks brighter for Korea's shipbuilders, since there are more offshore plant orders in the works.
What makes us busy these days are offshore plant orders that account for about half of total ship orders.
The LNG carrier orders are expected to rise this year, and the order of offshore plants are also continuously growing. We are anticipating robust growth at a similar level as last year.
Foreign firms are also flocking to Korea to learn from Korean shipbuilders. This corporation has moved its headquarters to Seoul district of Gangnam-gu to strengthen ties with Korea's leading shipbuilders.
Korea is at the center of the global offshore and marine industry, and that if we want to be number 1, if we want to succeed as a global marine offshore business, we have to succeed in Korea first.
Industry analysts say Korean shipbuilders are now poised to benefit from a new global trend of requiring eco-friendly ships with better fuel efficiency and less emissions. Song Ji-sun, ARIRANG News.
Now, China has called on the IMF to stick to a commitment to give emerging markets a greater say at the organization after the U.S. failed to authorize the funding needed to make the change. Son Jung-in reports.
Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Hong Lei has called on International Monetary Fund member nations to implement a plan that would give emerging markets more power and representation within the organization. His remarks on Wednesday seem to target the U.S., which is the IMF's largest veto power, after its lawmakers Monday failed to agree on funding measures needed for the reforms to progress. The reforms were first approved by IMF member countries in 2010. The reform package seeks to double the fund's lending capacity to more than $730 billion and shift voting shares to emerging markets and underrepresented countries. The IMF had previously intended to put the reforms into effect before October 2012, but the U.S. Congress is apparently in no hurry to approve any changes. Conservative U.S. House Republicans oppose the plan, which will shift more power to countries such as China, India, and Brazil. They also see the reforms as tantamount to approving fresh funding in a tight budget environment. IMF Managing Director Christine Lagarde expressed her disappointment with the setback, but added that she's hopeful the U.S. administration will continue to work on securing the necessary legislative authorization for the changes. 손정인, ARIRANG News.
Meanwhile, the head of the International Monetary Fund has warned the global economic recovery runs the risk of falling foul to deflation. Now, speaking at the national press in Washington Wednesday, Christine Lagarde said there was optimism in the air about growth, but the global recovery is still quite frail. Now, she said deflation could prove disastrous for the recovery. Lagarde's comments come amid growing debate about whether deflation might take hold in the Eurozone, where inflation seems unable to reach the European Central Bank's target. Deflation worries economists as, among other things, people become less willing to spend and particularly less willing to borrow. Now we turn to business today. First, a look at the local bourse. Seoul shares inched up to a one-week closing high on this Thursday after fresh U.S. data suggested a firm growth outlook there, while big bets were put off until a Korean corporate results season kicks off next week. At the closing bell, the benchmark Kospi was closed up 0.2% at 1957, its highest close since January 8th. The tech-heavy Kosdaq was also up by 0.4%, while on the foreign exchange counter, the Korean currency closed weaker against the greenback at roughly 1,063 won. Now, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's predominant concern seems to be the decline of his country's economy relative to that of China. This explains Abenomics, which is aimed at economic revitalization, and it's been roughly a year since the policy took effect. So, is it working? Well, expert opinion is varied. Many say it should be possible to end deflation, but a big upsurge in economic growth is unlikely. For a more in-depth look at this issue, we now have Dr. Kim Byung-ju, head of KLMP Consulting and a regular commentator on this program, live on the line. Good afternoon to you, Dr. Kim.
Good afternoon.
Now, increasingly, we are hearing that Abenomics just may not be working. So what is happening?
Right, exactly. In Korea, we are continuously hearing the possible impact of continuously weakening yen here, and the concerns are growing. But however, inside Japan, looks like indicators are not seems to be showing that Abenomics is kind of producing the results that have been anticipated so far. If we can consider the Nikkei average index, basically, they at the end of the year last year they had some highs, but since then it has been largely declining. Especially Tuesday, this past Tuesday, they had a big drop of the Nikkei average index. And yesterday they had some recovery, but still today it's showing weakness once again. Taking into account the fact that often stock index is often one of the best available indicators for not only the overall nature of the condition of the economy, but also sentiment of the participants right there. This continuous fall of Nikkei index itself is concerning. And you're talking about the economic growth itself. If we consider the quarterly economic growth, basically what was happening was, Abe came into power and introduced Abenomics, and since then the quarterly numbers have been kind of like increasing in terms of economic growth. Up until probably the beginning of last year, I have to say. And since then, if we take a look at the quarterly growth graph on the screen, basically it has been falling since the beginning of the year, last year. And the third quarter, where we have the number available for the last quarter, it has come down quite considerably. So this is creating a lot of concerns in the minds of the people who are watching and also hoping for the good results of the Abenomics.
Now, exporters here in Korea have been concerned about the weakening yen. However, a weaker yen is supposed to help Japan's exports. But it's been said that Japan's current account balance is actually on the decline. Now, why is that so?
Right, that is a very important question. And let's take a look at the graph about the current account balance in Japan. Basically, they're doing kind of like okay last year. But the thing is, since the end of later part of last year, current account has been shrinking in terms of these monthly numbers. And that big question about why that is not, why the weakening yen is not producing current account surplus. The answer is, ever since the Fukushima situation, the nuclear power generator creating, big accident there, since then, Japan has been switching away from the nuclear power generation. And that means Japan has to now import a lot of energy resources from overseas. So there is that money flowing outside of the country. And that seems to be kind of undermining overall effect that can be expected on the side of the, the exports. Exports are not recovering very fast. And they're saying exporters are basically not really reducing their price as the yen's value falls, and not enough. So on the export side, we don't see as much impact, and then on the import side, because of this energy situation, the deficit is rising, and that's leading this current account deficit that we are seeing here.
Now, another factor that could undermine Abenomics, in order to finance the expansionary policy of Abenomics, we understand that Japan is planning to raise its consumption tax come April.
Right, indeed. In April, they're supposed to raise the consumption tax from current 5% to 8%. And that's causing a lot of concerns in the minds of Japanese people because, tax increases always will have, suppressing effect on the economy. When we face this situation where we need economic recovery, this new tax rate, higher tax rate, will definitely pull the overall economic cycle down for sure. And this April's increase is not going to be the last one. Actually, they have planned to have another increase from 8% to 10% coming October 2015. So this is a long-term projection of continuous tax increase that will be coming the way. So indeed, people are very much getting concerned. We're in the situation where they need strong growth in consumption there. But because of this continuously rising consumption taxes, we cannot really exactly expect a strong rebound. That is a problem.
And also the interest rates, in the long run, it seems inevitable that Japan's interest rate will rise. Now, what kind of an impact will that have on the economy?
Simply said, Japan has a huge national debt. National debt is twice as much as their current GDP, and the interest rate will have to rise because of the overall liquidity that has been made available to the market, and also because of the QE tapering in the United States. And when that happens, interest rises when they have huge debt. That means a huge debt burden on the side of the Japanese economy. So that's another very scary scenario.
And no matter what, Korea, of course, does not want to see Abenomics fail. What do you see ahead?
Right. Korean economy is heavily dependent upon global economy, and Japanese economy is number 3 in the world. So we really definitely do not want to see failure of the Abenomics here. So we have to hope for good results of the Abenomics. But because of this vicious circle of growth that's not showing results, and the consumption tax that's coming into the picture, and the prospect of a rising interest rate in the future, probably is not together. They're not telling us any good signs for the future of Abenomics. So this is a very big concern, not only Japan, but also Korea, as well as the global economy.
All right, Dr. Kim Byung-ju, head of KLMP Consulting, and of course our regular commentator. Thank you so much, and we'll see you back in the studio tomorrow.
Okay, will do. Thank you.
With rapid changes in the global economy, up-to-date business and financial news has never been more essential. See what's making markets tick around the globe. We speak to the experts and cover the biggest financial stories.
North Korea provocation.
Quite good. We received a lot of positive feedback, especially from those abroad.
Now on to something that will concern parents of young children. In a quirkily titled report on a very serious issue, Greenpeace says toxic monsters may be lurking in your children's closets. The environmental campaign group says some top fashion brands are using hazardous chemicals in kids' clothes. Hwang Sung-hee reports.
A little story about the monsters in your closet. The monsters Greenpeace is referring to are toxic substances found in some famous global clothing brands. The shocking revelations come after the organization tested 82 items of children's clothing and shoes from 12 well-known brands.
And unfortunately, we found products from each of those brands that contain highly hazardous chemicals that can, for instance, disrupt our hormone system.
More than half of the products contained more than 1 milligram per kilogram of nonylphenol ethoxylates, or NPEs, which can affect a child's hormone system. Those include clothing from CNA, Disney, and American Apparel. Burberry's garments also contained a high amount. PFCs, or perfluorinated compounds that can affect the reproduction and immune system, were also detected in all 15 tested products. Adidas, Nike, and Uniqlo had especially high concentrations. Experts say although the chemicals don't pose an immediate risk to adults, children are more vulnerable to those substances. The results showed no major difference between the level of toxic substances found in children's clothing and those in adult pieces. Greenpeace is calling on the world's top fashion brands to take more responsibility for the environment. The organization has made progress since 2011, when it launched its so-called detox campaign, which encourages global brands to stop using hazardous chemicals in their products by 2020. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
Apple has agreed to refund millions to parents who say their kids were allowed to make purchases in apps without their consent. Now, under the terms of a settlement reached with the U.S. Federal Trade Commission, the iPhone maker also agreed to change its billing practices to ensure it has the expressed consent of parents before charging for in-app spending. The FTC complaint charged that Apple failed to inform parents that entering a password for a single in-app purchase opened a 15-minute window during which unlimited purchases could be made without further authorization. Well, Apple's App Store has many mobile applications and games offering virtual items such as currency with prices ranging from 99 cents to just under $100 that users can purchase from within the app instead at the store. The North American International Auto Show 2014 kicked off this week with a wide selection of luxury and high-performance models. Our Kim Min-ji takes us through some of the highlights of the show so far.
Sexy, sleek, and powerful cars are stealing the spotlight at this year's Detroit Auto Show. With the U.S. automobile market expected to grow 3.2% this year, automakers are betting that consumers will indulge in fancier cars rather than economically efficient models. And despite the range of green vehicles on display, the focus of this year's show was definitely on luxury and high-performance models. So which cars were making the headlines? General Motors unveiled its new Cadillac ATS Coupe to the world for the first time. The new compact car, which features more power and luxury design, features the brand's new Cadillac crest and enhanced 2-liter turbo engine. The U.S. automaker also clinched the show's major awards on Monday, with its Chevrolet Corvette Stingray winning the North American Car of the Year, among others. Porsche also unveiled its new 911 Targa, the latest model in the 911 series. It features a retractable roof panel that can be operated with just the click of a button. The Targa has a 350 horsepower engine and 287 pounds-feet of torque. German automakers also debuted a selection of world premier cars. Mercedes-Benz launched a new version of its S-Class sedan and a new high-powered S-Class coupe. BMW also used the event to unveil its new M3 and M4 high-performance models. Japanese carmaker Infiniti introduced its Q50 Air Rouge concept vehicle, which could have 500 horsepower if made. As for Korean automakers, Hyundai unveiled the next generation of its upscale Genesis sedan. The base model will have a 311 horsepower engine and 293 pounds-feet of torque. Kia also unveiled the Stinger GT4 Sports Coupe and its K900 sedan, which will be available in the U.S. in the first quarter of this year. The auto show will run until January 26th, and the public show will start on Saturday. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
Now, for those of you living here in Seoul, you might want to stay indoors as much as possible today because as of 3 p.m. Korea time, the city of Seoul has issued a pre-warning for ultra-fine dust particles. So it is one dry and dusty day here in Seoul, but here now is a look at the weather conditions in your neck of the woods. And that brings us to the end of this newscast, but stay tuned to ARIRANG. We have a lot more coming your way on Early Edition at 6.